All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. I'm Rachel Sealer. I'm the NACD Southwest Region Rep, and this is our final outreach session of our outreach series. So hopefully you've been able to catch the last four. If you haven't, they're all recorded and available on our website. But yes, today we're going to talk about leveraging social media, which I think is something, at least my personal feeling is, I wish I didn't have to know how to use social media, but it is a great tool, especially when we're trying to talk about our conservation projects and our conservation stories. So I'm excited to learn about how to use it as a tool today. And as you can see, this is going to be a recorded session, so you'll be able to reference it later on. And these recordings will be available, all five of them will be available in perpetuity. And so feel free to go back and reference these as you need to. So I would like to introduce, from KR Creative Strategies, we have Laura Meyer and Colton Meyer, and they are going to be leading us through this session today. So thank you, Laura and Colton, and I'm really excited to get started.
Thanks, Rachel. Thanks everyone for joining us. It's great to be with you this morning and to have been with you for the previous four sessions too. I just want to just extend a great thank you to NACD for making these sessions possible. Yeah, today we're going to be talking about some things that folks find to be their favorite thing, and for others, maybe it's more of a nightmare. But hopefully, by the end of today's session, our goal is that conservation districts can walk away and really see how social media can be used as a tool to help achieve the goals of your district, and then also have some tips to use social media really efficiently and effectively to achieve those goals. So for folks who haven't been at a previous session, Colton and I are with KR Creative Strategies. We're a small communications and marketing company that specializes in marketing services for conservation and agriculture and conservation districts in particular. I used to work for the Washington State Conservation Commission in Washington State, which is the state agency that administers funding to and promotes conservation districts there. I was the communications director, and Colton worked as a watershed coordinator for a conservation district in and for the state agency that works with conservation districts in Iowa. So we both have experience both with communication and outreach and with conservation districts, and how important outreach, including social media, can be as a tool for achieving conservation district goals. Like I said, we've got two things we're really covering today. The first section of our presentation will be on using social media as a tool to achieve your goals, how to integrate it as a tool into your work plans and things that you hope to achieve as a district. And then the second section will be on some tips and tricks for using to use social media effectively. And we sent to Rachel, and that'll go out after the session is done with the recording, a tip sheet. So a lot of the things we covered today will be included in that tip sheet as a take home for all of you and anyone who watches the session. So to get started, we're going to focus on making social media work for you and your CD. And this is so important because I think there are times where any organization, and that can include a conservation district, you'll see social media being used or a new platform introduced, and you want to kind of jump on that bandwagon, start using it. But it is like with any outreach tool, and we've discussed this in previous sessions, like we did on video, it's important to make sure that you're investing in something that's really going to work for you and help you achieve your goals, not just because it's, the latest thing that folks are talking about. Because we all know conservation districts, they're not an entity that typically has a lot of excess time and money and people to just throw at any latest greatest thing. You need to be really strategic and invest wisely. You usually have limited resources, and you want to make sure that you're getting the highest return on investment for those limited resources. So it's important to be really strategic about planning how you're going to use social media and evaluating if that tool or platform is really working for you and your district. One thing to do that's really important, and it can be really simple, and I mean, a bulleted list, even in just like a Word doc. It doesn't have to be a really massive strategic plan type document, is to come up with a playbook. And what I mean by that is a social media playbook is really just spending some time as a team or with all the right folks in the room thinking about, for the next 3 to 6 months, what what can we do to leverage social media for our district? Thinking about when there's certain months like May being wildfire preparedness month, just allowing time to think about what months are coming up that you want to take advantage of. What deadlines in your grants are coming up that you want to make sure you promote, what hiring opportunities. It's a way of organizing and just having a document somewhere that your team has access to know in January, we really want to focus on this. It doesn't have to be a complete list of every single piece of content that you're going to post that month, but at least some guidelines around the things you need to feature that month. So a monthly list, it can just be January with a list of bullets of things that you want to feature. Very simple, but at least some ideas of the types of content that you want to feature that way. If you have staff turnover, if you bring somebody new on, it's a very easy way to bring people on board. It helps people feel a little less anxiety about what to post. So we know that frequency of posting really helps you gain followers. So there can be a lot of pressure to be posting content on your social accounts. And with a playbook, it gives you some just a list of ideas of the type of content that you want to feature each month and relieve some of that pressure and anxiety. Gives you and your staff who will be administering your account some direction on where to look. And it can also help you then think about some of the goals you want to set as well. So if there's a certain number of engagements you want to reach by the end of that time period, making note of those. So you can really start thinking of it as a strategic schedule and some metrics that you want to track as a CD during that time period. And so in the next few slides, we're going to talk about some things to think about as you're building a 3 to 6 month playbook. And I would suggest, I think for most conservation districts, probably 6 months would be a great time period to write a playbook for. I think if you do it every 3 months, that's great, but then you do have to have a little more regular check-in and scheduling quarterly meetings, whereas 6 months feels like a good amount of time to kind of see how things are going and give it time to work before you do a check-in and evaluate how things are going.
Okay, so I apologize in advance if people can hear my squeaky oak chair that was built like 80 years ago. So looking at outcomes, when I worked for the conservation district here in Iowa, one message that really stood out to me, an outcome that I wanted to achieve, just it's good to sometimes step back and look at the big picture. And I really wanted to create a culture of conservation in the county that we were working in that seemed to be lacking. And the outcomes that you write into your long range 5-year plan, whatever annual plan, think about the greater one key overarching goal that those other outcomes in the plan are trying to achieve, and then figure out how can social media be a tool to help you get to those outcomes. For me, it was for building that culture of conservation. um, and so looking at measurable outcomes, I think that's the key thing. So an example could be enrolling X amount of people into an irrigation program, or engaging X amount of people into a brush management program or practice to address wildfire. In Washington State, they have the FireWise program. So just trying to, use social media as a tool for that, and then using those analytics to figure out, how effective are we being in engaging those people and getting them to cross the fence and engage with us to implement a practice or achieve a goal. So for state and grant funding, an example in Iowa here, we have the Water Quality Initiative. I'm sure you guys in the Southwest have your own, each state has their own uh, kind of flagship grant programs. And for us, we were really trying to get X amount of practices on the ground, whether it's no-till, cover crops, low disturbance manure application, waste storage facilities, things of that nature. Um, Looking at getting more practices on the ground, increasing attendance at field days. I know that's been a problem kind of across the board from a lot of different people I talk to, no matter where they're from, is how can we keep people engaged and engage new people into coming to our events, coming to field days, workshops, showing up and inquiring at a booth to learn more about what we have to offer. And social media can be a huge tool for you if it's used correctly. And then again, using those analytics to track, the certain method or approach that we used, how successful was it? So, when I worked for the district, I really had no idea what I was doing. I knew that social media could be really powerful if we used it effectively, and it started off really just throwing stuff on the wall to see what would stick. And over the years, we figured out, hey, this seems to be working really well, and this doesn't. And one of the things that we really had success with was showcasing success stories. This is an image of John Keel. He was one of the early adopters in our county of cover crops. And when I first started, we only had about 200 acres in the whole county being seeded to cover crops. And through showcasing people's successful experiences with a conservation practice, in this case cover crops, we were able to go from 200 acres to about 6, 7 years later, we were at just over 13,000 acres. And using social media as a platform to storytell and normalize a practice. We talk about conservation as innovative and new, and sometimes types of that type of language or keywords can off-put people, especially when they're um, doing something out of tradition, which is such a huge thing in the agriculture community. So showing showing that these really aren't new things. These are things that have been done locally for a decade. It's just that nobody knew about them because a lot of times farmers maybe don't feel comfortable sharing their story, or maybe um, they just don't feel comfortable. Um, Lost my train of thought there. Sorry about that. Um, they don't want to be in the limelight sometimes. So showing up there and just asking, hey, I want to get to know you better. I want to hear your story, even if you're in the process of trying to figure it out. That's okay. And helping them to feel comfortable. And if you can get those early adopters to jump on board with you, that really makes such a huge difference when it comes to sharing images, sharing videos, all those kinds of things can go a long way. And then later on, you can scale up and start engaging the middle adopters and late adopters, and before you know it, you've got that culture of conservation that I mentioned earlier. Um, let's see if I'm missing anything here. And the other thing, not only are we normalizing these practices, which I think is a key thing, but as divisions of government, the more things that we share on social media with what a farmer is doing, what we're doing, what our partners are doing, we're building transparency, and transparency builds trust, and trust helps people to engage with what you're trying to accomplish, whether it's certain programs or certain events. So that's trust is really the foundation of everything that we're trying to do.
Another thing to keep in mind, for folks, I know when we met with the Southwest region at the annual meeting in San Diego last year, folks are particularly interested in engaging urban audiences and folks in your communities that maybe traditionally haven't engaged with the district before. And social media can be a great tool for achieving that as well. And I know districts, including Colton's that he used to work for, and other districts that we've worked with around the nation have done a really wonderful job of when they are in the towns or communities, maybe at a booth, maybe at the fair, um, live streaming, actually doing a live stream to show the booth, show what they have going on there, inviting folks to visit the booth. But just like any time that you're engaging it in ways that maybe are less traditional for your district, at the school, in a community garden, whatever that looks like, capture some video, share that, give give people a way to look in and see the new ways that you're engaging with your community, even for those who aren't able to attend the event where you are. So with your operations, social media can be a really powerful tool for recruitment. So as districts are hiring staff or interns to implement your programs, social media can be a great, great way to bring in more qualified applicants and applicants who actually really care about your mission. I feel like at the end of the day, that can be what's so key about hiring great people to your team, is whether your mission is really in their heart. I mean, you can teach people some of the hard skills, but those soft skills and the caring about a CD mission is harder to find. So as you're developing your playbook, and you're thinking about the different goals that you have, like Colton mentioned, in your annual plan, your long range plan, and your grant deliverables, another group to meet with to come up with some ideas for your playbook is the folks who are going to be in charge of hiring. Any hiring managers, grant managers who might be hiring folks that year, sit down with them and get a sense of, over the next 6 months, what are there going to be any anticipated staffing needs, volunteer needs, intern needs? And if there are, consider having a lead up to that recruitment, even a couple months back from when you anticipate posting that recruitment. Plan campaigns where folks get to meet your team, feature your board members, feature your staff, show the cool things that you get to do. If any of your staff were fortunate enough to attend the NACD summer meeting or the recent regional meeting up in Alaska, show the things that conservation allows you to do in the world, the people it lets you meet, the farms you get to visit, the communities you get to engage in. Show your folks out enjoying their job and each other and the folks they get to work with. And that not only, even if you're not doing a recruitment, can really present your district in a very friendly and approachable, positive way. But certainly when it comes to then posting a recruitment, you've laid the groundwork for folks to be pretty excited, or for the right folks to recognize that this could be a career that they'd really enjoy. And very similarly, with elections, I know states have different rules for conservation district elections, but when you know that you're going to have a vacancy that year, meet with your elections officer if you have one, or whoever's in charge of sharing that information. And in the months leading up to sharing information about the vacancy on the board or the election itself, run a campaign that really highlights the locally led, community-driven nature of conservation district work and how exciting it is to be part of an organization that is structured that way, where it's not, somebody from out of town, out of state, out of touch with the community. This is a very community-driven, from the ground up organization. Get folks really excited about that structure so that when you have a vacancy on the board, perhaps you've reached somebody who also feels really excited about that type of structure and therefore would be a great candidate to apply. Staying in the operations, using social media as a tool to extend your policies and ethics. And I think particularly as a board member, this is important. CD board members might not be the ones to actually manage or run your social media accounts for your district, but there are some responsibilities for CD leadership to consider when it comes to social media. And your district may already have really clear procedures in place for social media, but if you are at all unsure, there are a few questions to think about. The first is, does your conservation district have a really clear social media policy or platform-specific policy that explains the process for requesting or authorizing a district-sponsored social media account? So can it just anyone at your district just decide to launch an account, or is there a very clear process in place for how they would go about doing that? For example, if you currently right now only have Facebook, but you're interested in expanding to Instagram or TikTok, is that something that staff can just do, or is there a process that they need to follow in order to do that? And is that process clearly defined in a policy? That policy should include some details about account administration roles and responsibilities. Can anyone at the district, staff or board, post on behalf of the district, or are there certain roles or folks or trainings that folks need to go through, or things that they need to read before they are allowed to post on behalf of the district on your account? And that really helps think about things like risk management, and setting permissions for folks as well. And then also including in that policy your method for managing and capturing public records. And again, this is something that is state specific. I think there's generally some public records rules that are across the board, but I also know that some states can have more stringent public records retention rules than others, and that varies. So something just as a base level to be very aware of, but also how does your state's rules around public records relate to social media? Does it include your social media records? And if so, and there's a lot of rules around that, and maybe something to check in with if you have a state regional manager or lead who could help you with that. But finding out first how those public records rules may apply to your social media, and if they do you have in that policy a really clear process for how those records, those public records, will be captured and retained if necessary? And then finally, another great thing to have laid out clearly is, does your CD have a publicly posted set of ground rules for engagement on your various social media accounts? So in other words, what type of behavior will or will not be allowed on your social accounts? And I would say when we've presented about social media in the past, this is probably the number one question we get is, what do we do if somebody starts bullying somebody else on our site? Somebody's posting content that has nothing to do with conservation on our site. Can we just take it down? Do we moderate? How do we handle this? It's really important that you very publicly have posted on your account what type of content you're expecting on the account, how you expect folks engaging with your account to behave, and what type of content you will take down. And on Meta platforms, there's a section under your About section of like a business site called Privacy and Legal Info. And that's a place where you can put down those ground rules that you as a district have decided on. And it's, I think, most importantly, giving you that permission to take down content that violates the rules that you've set as a district. And one thing I'll send to Rachel after this to include, when I was with the Washington State Conservation Commission, we worked on a policy for, at that time, it was a few years back, so it was just us, our policy for Facebook in particular. So we came up with our policy, but we also created some samples for conservation districts to look at of what our social media policy for Facebook looked like, what our ground rules look like. So I can share that link with you after this session so you can see that example. The only difference is at that time, there was a place on Meta where you could place those ground rules under what they called an impresum statement, and that has since changed, which is one of the fun things about social media. Things are always changing. And so now it's, again, what I said of under your About section, there's a privacy and legal info section where you can place those ground rules. And finally, using social media as a tool for your operations. Another thing to think about is making social media part of your crisis communication plan. For some of you who joined earlier, you might have heard Colton asking Rachel about wildfires and how the wildfire season was in Colorado, and whether it's wildfire or drought or some other crisis that might be impacting your community and the customers you work with there. Think ahead about how social media can be a tool for you to communicate with your community during times of crisis. Even something like a pandemic, which we had before, like how can social media be a tool to help you communicate during those times of crisis with your community? And think about which partners' social media content will you monitor and share during those times. So if it is wildfire, what partners in your community will you be constantly monitoring, looking to share their content? And making sure that those partners also have your CD as part of their crisis communications plan. If they know that they will have some really important, urgent information that they need to get out to landowners or agricultural landowners in particular, make sure that they have you as part of their crisis communication plan, and they know they can share their social media announcements with you to disseminate through your followers as well. So those are all some great ideas of things to think about as you're coming up with a playbook for your social media. And at the end, if you've come up with one for 6 months and you're entering your next 6 months, before you enter the next 6 months of coming up with what those outcomes and goals and ways that you want social media to work for you and your district will be, it's really important to do a tool debrief of just thinking about if you've set goals like Colton was mentioning of a number of folks that you want to have attend a field day or sign up for a program. Really look at the social media content that you posted related to those goals. How many people actually clicked on the link? If you had a call to action to subscribe to your newsletter that you shared on social media, how many people actually saw that, followed it, clicked on the link? Look at the analytics. That's one of the really, really great and powerful things about social media is the analytics that are built into it that allow you to really track if it's working for you. So just spend some time before you look at your next 6-month playbook of evaluating what worked well, what you want to keep doing. Take some time to really review your 6-month analytics to give you some good data so you can make great decisions and invest wisely in social media as a tool. So now we're going to shift into the second section of today's session that is on some tools and tips for using social media.
So this is a picture that Laura took, and this little marmot is giving the same talk that I'm about to give. sharing with his buddy that you've got 0.5 seconds to get people's attention, or he's telling them to talk to the hand. I'm not really for sure what's going on there, but it's true. You really have half a second to get somebody's attention. So, using eye-catching visuals, you can never have, like Laura mentioned earlier, you really just can't have enough pictures. Building a photo library is something that should be kind of on the top of everybody's list so that you have a lot of options to choose from. Using eye-catching headlines, using familiar language that people can relate to and identify with. And then if you're posting a video, look through all of those stills within that video and choose the thumbnail that you think really is just the most visually appealing. Maybe it's a aerial image that just captures the scenery really nicely, or maybe it's a more technical picture that shows how something's working. Just match that picture or thumbnail with your target audience to try to get and grab their attention. So then once you have that attention, you've got about 1 to 2 seconds to keep their attention. So just everyone take a moment to think about how you are at home after a day at work and you're kind of tired and you get on your phone and you're scrolling through your Google feed, your Facebook feed, or whatever it is, like pretty quickly. I'm surprised my thumb's not wore out by now, just sitting there and doing this. You just want to relax at night and find something interesting to read. So that just seems to be the cadence of it. Everyone's busy and they're just trying to find something to read quick. So try to hold that attention with familiar language. Add a short description to your post so that people can easily identify what it is you're trying to talk about. And just pay extra attention in what your audience is looking for and try to deliver that through your imagery and messaging. And keep it simple. You see a lot of posts out there or a lot of walls or feeds that there's like collages or too much stuff packed onto a page. And that can really just be overwhelming to a lot of different people. So trying to keep it simple, like if you do have a description, keep it short and sweet, use keywords, just enough to get your point across. Um, and just don't get too fluffy or too carried away. Try not to talk about multiple things in one post or on a feed. Try to limit it to one key message and be deliberate with how you're communicating that message, so that we don't overwhelm people. Because if they feel overwhelmed, they're probably not going to engage with our content.
So there's probably a lot of messages that you want to communicate with your audience. And when you're thinking about social media audiences, this can be one of the more frustrating things to learn, is that you have all this information that you want to share, all these things that you want to say, but what they actually want to hear is going to be a lot different than what you want to say. And so you may have seen some public entities, state agencies, other conservation districts sharing a lot more fun content that maybe they have a video that is just more fun than educational. And there's actually a strategy to that, because you need to end up packaging what you want to say in between a lot of what they actually want to hear. So as an example of this, I think in a previous session, someone had asked for examples of some social media accounts that folks might want to follow for ideas, who have been really creative and having some fun. And one of them that we shared was the National Park Service. And they have a pretty big following. And it includes a lot of folks. And I'm saying this because I know some of the folks that I work with that don't necessarily visit a lot of national parks, but they just find the National Park Service content hilarious and really fun. So they've been following them. I know a number of people that do this. And so like the National Park Service, half the time it seems like I see their content, they're like, they've built a visitor center out of Legos. And it doesn't really have that much educational value, but it's fun. And so people have started following for the fun content. And so they'll have like a fun piece of content, a joke, something really funny. And then after a few posts, they will have a really important and still fun, but educational piece about how to behave when you encounter a bear or how to behave when the parking lot is full. They will sandwich what they really want to say in the midst of a lot of pretty fun and entertaining content. But it's that balance of understanding that if you've got some really important messages that you want to share, the way to actually get people to follow you so that you can deliver those messages sometimes requires posting some content that maybe isn't your top choice of what you want to say, but it's fun and will get you followers that then at least will hear what you have to say. And like the fun content, like with the Park Service, is not completely unrelated from what they do. It's usually somehow tied to it. It is their visitor center. It is somehow tied to wildlife or something that's in their realm, but it sets them up to then deliver that really important piece of information to a larger audience because they've been sharing more of the content that their audience actually does look for and seek out. And this is another one I think we've talked about some version of this in every one of our 5 sessions of the importance of keeping things really short and concise. And that goes for video as well. The trend of video on social media is not going away. It's just continuing and getting shorter. So short form video is still really ruling social media. 30 seconds or less is really ideal. Definitely no more than a minute is the best rule. But I mean, even just a short, like 10 to 15-second video set to some fun sounds or trending music can really get you a lot of followers. And another thing to keep in mind, so short means it doesn't take you that much time, that's actually a great thing. And also, it doesn't really have to be super polished. There are cases where you do want to have a more polished, edited, nice video or reel. But in general, keeping it, I mean, if you just capture it on your phone, it feels very authentic, which I think for establishing trust, like Colton was saying, is such an important part of the work that conservation districts do. Having a not that polished video that is clearly captured on somebody's phone is a very authentic way to engage your audience. They don't feel like you're trying to sell them anything. You're just being you, and you're somebody who's part of their community. It doesn't have that type of marketing department to try to engage them. You're just sharing a day in the life at the district in a very authentic way. So don't feel like they have to be the most polished video, which again, that's a great thing. It's going to save you money. So the bite-sized authentic video is kind of a win-win. It doesn't take a whole lot of time and it doesn't take a whole lot of money, but it's actually the type of content that a lot of followers are looking for.
Definitely. Kind of to add on to that, I remember one of the videos that we recorded of a farmer kind of giving a testimonial. You could hear the technician in the background saying, "Okay, I'm ready," when you started the video recording. And I think it kind of made it just funny. So yeah, they don't have to be very polished. So for inviting user-generated content tags, we've talked a lot about trust. This is another great way to get activities and events that the CD's hosting or collaborating on, shared on partner walls, partner pages, partner feeds. And when you have that happening, that just builds so much trust and that culture of conservation to help you move the needle and implement more practices and get more engagement. So inviting trusted partners, maybe it's the local farm bureau, maybe it's a school, Here in Iowa, we had we've got a lot of really passionate co-ops that are trying really hard to do more and do better with conservation and helping farmers get signed up for things like that. So when we're inviting them to our events and they're sharing, like, hey, come check out the blank county conservation board in front of our building this morning, visit their booth, see what they have going on. It just it makes us seem more integral into the community. And I think that's really important and a good look for conservation districts. Another example would be, we had a local high school that we were able to get um, like extra wood panels that were donated from Ducks Unlimited. And then we dropped those off to a school. They assembled them and installed them. And then they came back to us for a grant to get some of the posts and the hardware and stuff like that. And then they shared that on their Facebook page, which was really cool to show that how we kind of collaborated on that effort for some wildlife habitat. So there's a lot that you can do with that. Drones. Drones are a really powerful tool. A lot of the things that we're trying to accomplish out there are at such a large scale. The problems are at a large scale, but also the solutions are at a large scale, many of them. So I can stand here with my phone and take a picture of a couple trees that we planted in a riparian buffer, or I can get 400 feet up in the air with a drone and capture that entire length of that riparian buffer that might be half a mile long. And that's a really powerful image. And they say an image is worth 1,000 words. And I totally agree with that. And the other thing is, when you're at that scale, you can almost get a feel of a watershed, and how you can see multiple farms in the same image, and you can see how that drainage ditch is receiving tiles from across the fence line and how it goes up into this neighbor's land. And it really does a nice visual showing how we're all kind of connected and in this together, and how, hey, my neighbor downstream is doing this, maybe I should consider doing it as well. So the scale of drone imagery is really powerful. And, this is an example here of a bioreactor that we installed. And if I had to try to describe what a bioreactor is, it could take a while, but this image, you can clearly see the chamber that's lined with plastic that has the wood chips in it. And for the most part, you can kind of see the little tile outlet. So you can get the vibe that there's drainage tile coming from the field. We're clearing the nitrates out of it within those wood chips, and then we're outletting it into the stream. And then and this is a great example of, like, during construction imagery. And in a perfect world, you'd be able to have pre-construction and post-construction along with this to really tell the whole story. Yeah, I think that's all I had for that. So, leveraging expertise and how-to videos. So Laura really did a nice job sharing how the videos need to be short and concise. And there's a great opportunity to educate effectively. We had a Fairy CD up in Washington recently shared a how-to video of how to navigate to a new page that they added to their website. So again, using social media as a tool to leverage other platforms that you're using for outreach, and to make those other platforms perform better. That video or that image we had of John Keel back there standing next to his John Deere drill, that was a really short and sweet, maybe 1 or 2 minute video of just some of the parts that he replaces, some of the easily worn parts, and how to set up the drill so that it's seating at the right rate and the right depth and all those kinds of things. So, working with your partners in conservation or your producers out in the field, or the urban side, maybe some gardener has some tips or tricks that they would like to showcase, and recording just little snippets and posting it on social media can be a great way to share some of those details.
And just to add to that, I know a lot of conservation districts have native plant sales. And from my experience planting native plants myself and purchasing from conservation districts, I spent a lot of time looking up how to plant each different species correctly, how to care for them correctly. And so I think there's a great opportunity for those districts that do sell native plants or have plant sales in the lead up to events like that. I mean, sticking with the, one message or one concept per post or video, what are your top sellers of plants at those? And in the weeks leading up to your sale, have a short video on just care tips for each of those top selling plants. Or even maybe you have some plants that maybe aren't selling as well and you really want to push, like share a video of what are the benefits of it. I know we had talked with one district as an idea of like almost setting up videos or profiles that are like a dating profile for each of their plants. Have some fun with it and post on social media of like, what this plant is looking for, where it thrives, what it really likes to do. But have some fun with it, but really use your experience and your knowledge about things that folks are looking for, which plants have a wide audience base from your urban communities into your rural areas but not everybody knows how to care for them correctly. Even those of us who've been in conservation, I don't know how to care correctly for every plant that I've bought for our property. So folks are really looking for, and they don't necessarily want to get a book to read up on these things. They want a short video on how do I do this correctly? And conservation districts through your social media have a great opportunity to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And along that note too, like if you're really, I kind of stumbled upon a nut when I made this video, but sometimes you can really strategize effectively and you can do multiple things in one short video. We did a video, it was really started off as a farmer testimonial, but it ended up being a farmer testimonial, a how-to of how to sign up for eQuip. And the timing was just right, where at the end of the video, we did a call to, hey, we've got a deadline coming up in X amount of days. So come into the office and take advantage of the program. So if you are thinking ahead and planning ahead, you can really cover a lot of ground in a 1 or 2 minute video. And okay, so leveraging the people of conservation and having fun. When I work for the district, I feel like I maybe took myself a little too seriously at times, and I wish I would have had more fun, because conservation really it's creative. You have to come up with your own solutions a lot of the time, and you work with so many different personalities, whether it's in the office or out in the field, and some of those people are just incredible and fun people. And if you've got somebody funny in the bunch, like the National Park Service, we weave that in. People love to laugh. They like a good joke, weave in the fun with the facts. Let's see. One of the things that we were able to do was, getting back to just leveraging people around you. There's a lot of different organizations in conservation that you can partner with, and there's a lot of people that are sitting right beside you that maybe it's not in their job description, but if they've got time and they're willing to try something new. We had a soil technician that we had a great relationship, and I wanted to start doing more of these social media videos, and he became my videographer or whatever, or producer or whatever you would call that, but he was out there holding the phone and recording and trying to get the right lighting and learning, like, hey, we can't hear you because it's too windy, so let's get behind this shed or whatever it was. And he loved it, and we had a great time. So just be creative, and don't be afraid to ask the people around you to help try something new. Let's see, leveraging partners. Um, so yeah, helping fellow conservation partners share their content on your platform. So again, this is goes into building trust and that symbiotic relationship. A lot of partners might not have access to social media, like maybe they're kind of restricted to it, like NRCS, or they don't have the flexibility that a district might have. So, sharing your platform and letting other people leverage you, um, is a great way to just be fair and have that symbiotic relationship. And maybe that's how it starts off, is you help a partner that's in need, and then down the road they're sharing your content on their feed, and giving you access to a whole new group of people that you previously didn't have access to, which again is helping us move the needle in our efforts to get more done on the ground and improve and protect our resources. Um, I think that's about. Oh well, an example of that. Farmers Co-op Society. They were one of the big reasons why we were able to go from 200 acres to 13,000 acres in cover crops was because of the local co-op that we had. And we were sharing some things that they were doing on our feed, and that's how it started off. And then later on, they invited us to be on their social media video series called Tailgate Talks, and they were inviting community leaders to be on that. So the fact that we were invited on there and had a few minutes to just share our programs, talk about the people in the office and how we help the community. It really meant a lot to us, and I think it did a lot of good for both, for us and the co-op. The one other thing that's important to note there is that sometimes you can overwhelm your audience if you're allowing too many people to uh, post things on your feed, or if you're sharing too much from your partners. So really try to weed out, um, you know, messages that are really in line with yours, things that are, again, go back to your work plan and what you're really trying to accomplish, and tease out the partners and the messaging that are going to help you get there, and then politely decline the other ones that just don't help you meet your goals. Because at the end of the day, that's really what we're trying to accomplish. Um, that's it.
So just a couple last tips before we opened up for questions. And the first is just remembering that social media is being used as a search engine. So yes, there are still some people that Google things, but there are also a lot of younger folks who are searching for things in TikTok, in Meta. They're looking up content in social media and treating it like a search engine. And so it's important to take steps to make your content on your district's social media discoverable. And some ways that you do that are to always tag people in places, to make sure that you are using captions that use relevant keywords. So we have had sessions earlier on, and Colton mentioned earlier on in this session, to use language that your audience uses, not the technical language that we in the conservation world necessarily use. What will your audience use, and the folks that you want to engage most, what language will they use, and use that as the language in your captions, in your hashtags. And so like as an example, if you are sharing information about funding being available, call it funding, not cost share. Most people don't use the word cost share in your audience. That's more of an internal jargon term rather than like funding or money. And then add alt text to your images. So that's just kind of behind the scenes, like the short description of what an image is. All of these things will help your content rise to the top of folks' searches as they use social media as a search engine. If you are serving a bilingual community, there's a couple recommended options for how to administer your social media account. The top recommendation is very time consuming, but it is still the most recommended, and that is to actually have separate accounts for the different language audiences. I know for a lot of conservation districts that is time prohibitive for them, and they don't have the capacity to run two completely separate accounts for the different languages in their community. So the alternative is to post two versions of the content, but within one post. So rather than, for example, posting an event announcement once in English and then creating a second post after that in Spanish, make sure that's in one post. So maybe it's two graphics, one in English, one in Spanish, that are shared as part of one post so that you don't overwhelm the feed of your users, and then they might end up unfollowing you. We have seen some districts basically create, even if it's more of a graphic, they'll do it kind of like a reel. They'll have like a recorded slide of their event, and it kind of animates the language in English, and then they'll animate the same slide but populated in Spanish language instead. So that's another way to do that. And then finally, look into social media advertising. It is, if you haven't yet, it is a very affordable and very effective tool that conservation districts, I think, could really get some return on investment from. You can target your audience by age, geographic location, which is important with districts being so local, their behavior, their interests. And you can set a max of very little amount of money for how much you're willing to spend on different ads and campaigns. And just to give you a sense, the pricing is a little complicated if you've ever looked into like Meta's ad buys, but just to give you a sense, typically like a cost per click, if you're running an ad campaign and you're trying to get people to click on something like a newsletter sign up, it's generally around 30 cents per click. And then again, these are really, the cost structure is a little funky if you've ever worked in Meta ads, but it's usually around like $5 to $10 per 1,000 impressions. For like 1,000 people seeing your content, it's $5 to $10. So it's actually really affordable. And again, you can spend as little as $5, you can spend up to thousands, but typically for districts that have more targeted local audiences, you wouldn't have to spend that much to actually get quite a bit out of it. So I highly recommend looking into social media advertising to promote some of your key actionable content. So like I said at the beginning, we do have a tip sheet with a lot of what we shared today that Rachel will be sending out to you. And I'll also add to that that link to the social media policies and ground rules example that we mentioned earlier. With that, we'll see if there are any questions.
Thank you, Laura and Colton. That was really interesting and definitely feels a lot less daunting to try and use social media as a tool. So if anybody has any questions, feel free. You can either put it in the chat, or if you'd rather, you can jump off mute and ask it directly. Either is great. One question I had while others are thinking about their questions is, one thing that I always find interesting about social media is that posts will go viral for very odd reasons sometimes that weren't probably the intention of the original poster. So if you're lucky enough to for that to happen to you, and hopefully it happens in a positive context, do you have any tips on how to kind of harness that interest and get it back on your mission instead of like the person's funny shirt or whatever it was that made it go viral?
That is a great question. And I think that is, earlier on, we talked about social media policy. And I think especially for board members and leaders at your district, it is something to be aware of when you're thinking about risk management and social media. Anytime you put something out on social media, there is a chance that somebody else is going to run with it in a direction that you did not intend for it to head. So I would say in your social media policy, it's important in your risk management section to identify the folks who would be in charge of responding. So, is there somebody on the board who would be kind of like a designated social media advisor, as well as the executive director and maybe one other person, like who is in charge of if something kind of gets out of control, something goes viral and takes on a life of its own in a way that wasn't intended by the district, who is in charge with responding? And I think it's kind of a hard question to answer because it really depends on like what the content was, what shape it took after you shared it and the public ran with it. But so I think it's most important to make sure that you have a process in place and identify people in place that know, like, should that happen, these are the folks who are going to come into a room and figure out, specific to the situation, how the district is going to respond, and making sure that there's some timing built into that as well, before it gets carried away. It's nothing you'd want to wait on. This is a very time sensitive thing. The district would want to make sure they're coming up with a response specific to that situation within a very short amount of time. So those folks would need to be able to respond quickly, know that they are expected to come together quickly to handle that type of situation.
Yeah, and to add to that, I would say that if it's something negative, definitely get in the huddle and figure out how to prevent that from happening again, and how we can um, maybe bury that with some additional content or whatever. But if it was something positive and maybe repeatable, I would try to be leveraging that. If it was a goofy shirt but it wasn't offensive or something, then post more videos and images of you wearing your goofy shirt or whatever. And again, like entertaining people, but weaving in um, some of the information that you're trying to share too. So leverage it um, if at all possible.
Great, thank you both. Does anybody else have any questions? All right, well, we're a little bit over the hour, so I won't keep you all. But of course, if you think of something when we log off, feel free to email me or Laura or Colton. I'm sure they'd both be happy to answer. And then, like Laura mentioned, we will send out that tip sheet with the link to the recording once that's posted on our YouTube site. So be on the lookout for that. And I just want to really thank everybody for joining us for this Southwest region outreach session training series, and hopefully they were useful to you. Feel free to visit the recordings as you want to and share them far and wide. So thank you everyone, and have a great rest of your day.